Hello.
Hello.
How are
How are
you?
you? Good. How are you?
Good.
Great. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my glasses because I have this blue blocker and like there's terrible glare.
I think it looks okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Anyway, and who knows if we'll even really have very many people on here.
That's
There
okay.
were only 7 registered, I think, and so we'll see.
That's what
But
Rachel said. That's okay. I'm happy just to talk to you guys.
I know that's what we said yesterday. We're like, well, we'll just have a fun conversation. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how have you been?
I've been good.
Good.
It's a quiet week. My
Oh,
my daughter, Addie, who you know,
yeah.
is in Kenya for 10 days
Oh, wow.
for a mission
How
trip.
how old is she now?
16. Yep.
I'm so old.
No, you're not.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's
Yep.
crazy. That's a long
Yeah.
ways.
It's a long ways. It's exciting. She's
Is
she's
it
up
with
for
her your church or
it.
okay.
Yep.
Cool. What an awesome experience.
I know. I think it's really awesome. So I'm
Yeah.
happy for her.
Uh-huh.
I was a little jealous.
Right? You couldn't go as a chaperone or
No, I would have loved to, but they try not to have any parents come because it just changes
oh,
the experience for the kids,
yeah,
which I actually think is really true. So
true.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Okay. So when does she get back?
July 1st. So it's like a
Oh,
10 days total. So
okay.
yep.
Okay.
Pretty short, but
Yeah. Is she
still
your
good.
oldest? I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then my middle is at basketball camp. So
Oh,
it's just very quiet around here.
it's amazing how the dynamics change with just one or
Yes.
two missing
Yeah,
people, right?
their different personalities bring different things. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
What are you doing this
Okay.
summer?
Well, I bought a house and I'm trying to sell a house. Hi,
Oh
Rachel.
wow. Hi Rachel.
Hello, I love your haircut.
Thank you. I like Elise, you cut yours too. I haven't seen it short.
Well, I'm growing it.
Oh, you are.
It
Oh,
was
okay.
always really
Oh,
short.
that's right. Yes.
This is my midlife crisis.
And this is mine.
I went through a phase where I was going to buy a camper,
Uh-huh.
and I left that phase and just grew my hair instead, which I think
Instead.
was a good choice.
That's really funny. My husband just said he thinks we should buy a camper.
Well, I was gonna buy like a camper for 2 people.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why, too. Like, because I drag my mom with me everywhere
Hmm.
because I'm gonna have 2 boys at college at the same place. And I thought, well, I'll just park a camper up there and then I can save money on the Econo Lodge. I'm
They'll
like
be
a
like, oh
gold
yeah,
member
you want to
of
go to my
Choice
mom's
Hotels.
camper?
Where are they in school?
They're at Dordt University
Oh
and
yeah.
Sioux Center,
Uh-huh.
and Bennett will be a senior and Cooper will be a freshman. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but I've moved on and I'm not getting a camper. They were so cute though. There were a whole bunch of mint green ones. I had high, like some of them didn't have bathrooms, but they were cute.
That's what matters.
Priorities, right. So that when I'm driving down the interstate, people can be like, "Oh, look at
Oh
that cute
yeah, so
camper."
cute.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yep.
nothing says you're single and alone like a mint green camper.
Oh my gosh, stop it.
I mean, seriously, what husband is gonna let their wife buy a mint green camper?
A
None.
smart one.
The
That's
vintage
true.
ones were, get a
Yeah,
vintage one. They're
I
that
bet.
green color.
Oh yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
what I'm looking at,
That's what it was. Oh
which
yeah.
is
My
even
parents had
better
one.
because I
What?
need something that's high maintenance. Oh, brother.
That's so funny.
Corey, is
Okay, so
Addie on a trip this week? Tim was
Yeah,
mentioning that his son is
yeah, she's
going.
with Tim's son in Kenya.
Nice.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Uh-huh.
How long are they there?
10 days.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Has she been to Africa before?
She has not. I
No.
have been twice, and I love it there.
Yeah,
I
that'll
mean,
be
it's a big
so
place.
fun.
It's a big place, but both of my experiences were awesome. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for her.
That's fun.
Yeah, last year, this time, Rachel, you were getting ready
Yeah,
to go
we
to
went in
Africa.
August.
Oh, you
Mhm.
did?
Yeah, we went and did like some like medical missions type stuff through Kinetic Edge. So it was a team of 8 of us, I think.
Really?
PTs and then me. Yeah,
Nice.
it was cool. It was really cool.
Did Tim go?
Definitely. No, he didn't go. I think that was right before Meg was heading back to school.
Okay.
And so it just didn't line up timing wise. But yeah, it was fun. It was hard, but it was fun.
Where were you?
We went to Tanzania. We were on like the west side of Tanzania. I don't know my east and west, but
Okay.
right along, it's called Lake Tanganyika. It's like the longest lake in the world.
Okay.
And it like, I think it's Tanzania, Congo, and another country all border the same lake. So we were kind of right on the edge, but
Like bigger than a Great Lake.
yeah.
That's
It was
big.
huge, like standing out on it. I mean, I know the Great Lakes are like this too, where you like can't see the end,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was long and skinny.
Wow.
But even the like skinny side of it, you couldn't see across.
Uh-huh.
It was wild.
Very
And what did
cool.
you do?
We went to a couple different, like pretty remote villages, and I had no idea what we were going to do. Like, we didn't really know the expectation before we went, but they had all sorts of, like, I mean, it sounds bad now, but like all sorts of different, like pharmaceuticals and different treatments for like worms and fungus and all this stuff. So we were essentially like treating people for those types of things while we were
Okay.
there. Yeah, I felt way over my head, but also like it was the only thing they had. Like these people had never been to a doctor even, so
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like we have a participant who has joined us. So let's see. Do we have a bunch of questions that we've already been asked? Hi, Chris.
Let me pull them up here.
And just a few housekeeping things. So this is being recorded and will be shared with anybody who registered. So we'll keep our cameras on, but Chris, if you want to, you can turn your camera off or you can leave it on, whichever you prefer. So anyway, but then yeah, we'll just kind of go through the questions and kind of just have a virtual coffee here with us, and hopefully we'll shed some light on some different issues and questions that people have. So great.
Yes. Well, I have our little list pulled up. And Corey, maybe we'll start with a question kind of for you, and then we can jump in too.
Oh, hold on a second. Maybe we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Go for it, Elise. You can
Okay,
start.
I'll start. So I'm Elise Spronk. I'm an occupational therapist, have been for, I don't know, since 1998. So whatever that is, 27 years. Really working a lot in pediatrics in the last 19 years, and have had the privilege of working with both of these two wonderful professionals for, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 years. How
Maybe
long have
8
I
years.
known you? 8 years? Yeah.
I think 8,
So,
yeah.
yeah, and I've known Rachel probably about that long too. So, all right. Rachel, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, my name's Rachael Barnette. I am also an occupational therapist. I work at our Ames Clinic, and then I kind of bounce between Des Moines and Pella from time to time too. But I have been at Kinetic Edge for the last 4 years, and I treat pretty much all pediatrics and some adults with like sensory-based concerns, trauma, but I don't do as much of the orthopedic stuff, more so like developmental type concerns. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Corey.
And I'm Corrine Patten. I'm a pediatrician in Ames, Iowa at McFarland Clinic. I've been here for 16 years, and I met Elise 8 years ago. She took care of my daughter, and then she introduced me to Rachael when Rachael came to town. And now I still work with both of you with referrals. So
Yeah.
shared patients.
Yes. It's great.
All righty. Well, we will start with kind of a Corey question. One of the questions that we had was like, what are you looking for when you have kiddos that you see in your office? Like, what types of things are you looking at when you're assessing kiddos and determining if they need a referral to like any outside source, whether that be OT or play therapy or PT even? Like, what are your red flags of like, yep, this might be helpful?
That's a good question. It's a big question.
Yes.
And it basically, I think every pediatrician probably has some milestone benchmarks for each kid in several domains at each well check. So that's somewhat standardized with some screening questions that people fill out on paperwork that they do when they come to the doctor. So when you come and get a form that has a zillion questions on it, there's always a section that's a developmental screening. And it's meant to be just sort of the first glance at how are things going developmentally and are there any concerns. It's very interesting. Some people, personality wise, will just check them all and don't even read them. Some people are grade very hardly, and like they'll give their kid like they're doing 3 of the 10 things, and then we start to dive into it, and they're really right on track. So there's some. It's just a screening. It's meant to like get the conversation going.
Yeah.
But I would say usually, or quite often, when a referral needs to be made, parents have an intuition about that, and they're bringing up a concern or something they want to talk about. They might not know what they need help with or why they're concerned about it, but the screening gives us a jumping springboard for talking about what the child is doing developmentally that's on track and what maybe isn't, but often also parent concerns. Let's decide when we need a referral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you decide? I mean, obviously we as OTs have kind of our idea of like our scope, right? And what we're best equipped to handle and what a play therapist might be best equipped to handle, or a PT. But is there anything that you think like, okay, if I hear this tells me like, yes, they need OT. Like, do you have anything that triggers that, or is it more just general? Like, we'll start there.
No, it's more general. I feel
Yeah.
like it's case by case, and it's there are times when I think maybe play therapy or occupational therapy could be appropriate when we're talking about some like anxiety or impulsiveness, like not a lot of like body awareness or boundaries or things like that. Sometimes I think you could do either.
Yeah.
Since you guys came to town and we have more accessibility with occupational therapy, that's often where I like to start. And I often find that they end up they often don't need both.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of overlap for sure.
Yes. And I think when they're younger, I definitely lean toward occupational therapy. I think sometimes play around like kindergarten age can be really great too, but sometimes it depends on age. Sometimes it depends on what the parents have heard of and are interested in and
yeah, totally.
with. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, one of the other questions that we got too is like, what is OT? Which, yeah, a lot of people, we do a really not great job of naming ourselves or explaining what we do. Occupational therapy maybe isn't the clearest description of like what we're actually doing. So Elise, maybe we can chat a little bit about like what is OT
Yeah,
and what does it have to do with children specifically?
right. I just had this question from a client just the other day, our client's parent. And so, I like to always make sure people understand like occupation doesn't mean job, that, historically the root of that was, anything that brings meaning to a person's life, or, so that we're working on rehabilitating something that, whatever that person's occupation is. So for a child, it's going to be play. Um, predominantly, but then also like skills that they need to be able to dress themselves and eat and sleep and be able to go to the bathroom and go to school, those types of things. But then also that we're using occupation, so using activities to be able to help in that rehabilitation process. So anyway, that's usually how I explain it. How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, I think I get that question a lot where like parents will come in and say, like, we'll be chatting about like, so what brought you here today? And a lot of times they're like, I don't know. I just know that someone told us we should be here, right? Like, I
Right.
don't know what you do enough to know what to tell
Mhm.
you. Yeah, so when I tell parents or even kids, a lot of times what I'll explain is like our job is to help figure out like where the disconnect is between our brain and our body. Like if we are in a body that we are not in control of, whether that be like emotionally or impulse control or actual motor skills, our job is to figure out like where that hiccup is in that connection and then help our brain and body get back on the right track to help us work together. So when I'm explaining that to kids, usually in our assessment or when we're evaluating, I'll just tell them like we're going to do these silly little tests that tell me how our brain and our body are communicating. And sometimes our body does something silly that we might not even be in control of, right? But we're looking to see like, do we have that control of our body? Because if we don't have that control of our body, how are we supposed to be in control of our emotions? How are we supposed to be in control of like social dynamics and how we interact with other people? So that really carries over into like all the skills that we need to do in a day. Yeah, and it's not uncommon that parents are like, oh, okay, well then let me tell you, like, here's this list of things that are tricky for us, right? But the name itself just doesn't lend itself to like a clear idea of what that looks like. Um, Off that same line, we had a question that was, why could
Can I
I
go
or
back?
why should, oh, go ahead.
Can I go back to that question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
At least when I met you because I brought my daughter to you
Mhm.
and I asked you that question.
Oh, you
And
did?
I did.
What did
Um,
I say?
you talked about you talked about the pyramid.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Will you
yeah,
talk
That's
yeah.
about
what we
that?
still use.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
You want me to give the pyramid
Yeah, will you
speech,
give
the
the pyramid
spiel?
speech?
Sure.
Okay.
You want me to, or Rachel, you want to give the pyramid speech?
Well,
I
I'm happy.
I can. That's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, yeah, because I think a lot of times, parents do come in and they probably have behavior concerns and we're evaluating motor skills, right?
Mhm.
And they will have completed the sensory profile ahead of time and will have completed a reflex checklist, which kind of tells them like why we care about some of these reflexes. But I think that a lot of times they're still a little stumped, like,
Mhm.
how on earth
Yeah, how do
is
we get from here to here?
right? So I love to, I even have like an actual pyramid in our pellet clinic. It's pretty beat up by now because I've used it a lot. But, the gist of it is like if we were going to look at a child's function like a pyramid, up at the top would be academic learning, followed closely behind by behavior and activities of daily living. So those would be like dressing, bathing, grooming, hygiene. eating, those types of things. Underneath that are all sorts of sensory motor, cognitive motor or cognitive skills, visual perception skills, that should just be fairly automatic, for the child. And so they should, not have to think a whole lot about the two sides of their body working together. So kind of that brain body, connection that Rachael just talked about. And then at the very foundation of that is our sensory processing. So how do we take in our sensory, experiences around us? And what does our brain do with that, to get our body to respond? And then also our reflex integration. And so when we do an evaluation, we want to determine which of those bricks from the bottom up is maybe not quite as stable, not right where it should be. Or maybe, that's almost absent, right? And so that way we know what we need to work on things up at the top. So we call it a bottom up approach, which is different than, a top down approach to behavior would be, reward charts or punishments or, those types of things, which isn't bad in and of itself, unless the bottom of the pyramid is unstable and not where it should be. So anyway, that's the little pyramid spiel.
Thank you.
Yep.
I use that. I try to explain to my patients that I'm referring, why
Yeah.
they're being referred, wherever I'm referring them.
Right.
But it is often an, oh, by the way, concern about something at the top of the pyramid.
Mhm.
At the end of the
Yep.
appointment that
Yeah.
we say, I wonder if there's something more foundational that we could address. And then I
Yeah.
say, let's have OT do an evaluation and see
Yeah.
if we think they could help.
I feel like we get a lot of people into our clinics who maybe have tried a lot of other things, and so sometimes I'll say, if you feel like you've kind of been hitting your head up against a brick wall, like, okay, we've tried this, we've tried that, we've tried, then perhaps it's because there's something else missing, something else is not quite connected. And so we need to figure that out so that we can get at the root cause of the issue. So yeah.
Yeah, and kind of off of that too, I feel like a lot of times we get a lot of referrals for kids that struggle with like emotional regulation or impulse control or those higher level behavior skills. And those kids can name every regulation strategy under the sun. They can tell you exactly what they should do in those moments. But then they get to those moments of overwhelm or frustration or high emotions, and they just cannot control themselves, right? Like they can't use those strategies when it's meaningful and when they need to. So oftentimes, like when we talk about this bottom layer foundation, a lot of times I feel like that's kind of an aha moment for parents of like, oh yeah, like they lack the body awareness to know when they're frustrated before they're angry, right? They're not feeling that 0 to 59. They just notice that they're having an emotion or that they're out of control once they're too far out of control to actually utilize those strategies. So a lot of what we're working on too is just like building that self-awareness, because most kids, especially with all the social emotional learning that is built into school and built into different programs, like they can name emotions, they can name regulation strategies. It's just using them. That's actually the missing piece there. So.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot more with interoception too lately, which is exactly what Rachel's talking about. Just, the kids who don't even know, like, well, how does my body feel when it's starting to get dysregulated? We get all sorts of little signals. When I start to get stressed, I can feel it in my neck. My muscles get tight, I might start to sweat a little bit. My heart rate increases. And so if kids aren't necessarily detecting like these are the things that are happening, then how are they going to know to use those strategies? So that's usually, when I start to hear when we've maybe seen a child for a long time or they're coming to us after having worked on a lot of stuff, it's like, well, let's look at that. So anyway.
Yeah. Another question that we got was, this was kind of talked about, but why could I or why should I bring my kiddo to OT? What could OT help with or address? It's a very broad question, and the answer is also very broad. I like to think if we go back to Elise's explanation of OT and occupations, like if a child's ability to do what they need to do in a day is impacted, whether that be through physical skills, cognitive skills, visual skills, emotional skills, those are all things that OT is trained to address. So specifically when we see kiddos in the clinic, a lot of times those concerns are like we're having trouble with feeding, we're a picky eater, we are having outbursts frequently, difficulty with attention, but the list is far more broad than that. Really, if they're impacted in their ability to do whatever it is that they need to do in a day, OT is trained in some way to address that. Elise, do you have anything
I
to
will
add?
sometimes, parents will wonder like, okay, well, is this just normal behavior? Like,
Right.
is this age appropriate that, my kid has a hard time sitting in a restaurant and we can't go to the store together and, those types of things. And so sometimes I'll refer to it as the eggshell test. And I'll ask parents, do you feel like you're walking on eggshells around your child? Most of the time. And oh yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Okay, well then we probably need to work on something. If you as the parent are feeling uncomfortable or tense and nervous, just wondering how your child is going to respond or react, then that to me is there's a functional issue there. And so that will sometimes, resonate with people too. So
Yeah, and sometimes what we're seeing on the surface is indicative of something below the surface too. So Corey, I remember a while ago, I got like 5 referrals in a row from you for mouth breathing. And I was like, okay, let's see what this is about, right? Like mouth breathing, it seems like one thing, right? But when we were getting these kids in the clinic, like the categories of challenges were so similar, right? It was like copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. They were anxious. They weren't sleeping well. A lot of times they were very sensory avoidant or just overstimulated all the time, right? So thinking about like, okay, mouth breathing, that seems like just a simple, like, okay, they're just breathing through their mouth, who cares, right? But underlying that can be so many other skills that are also challenging, and usually like core strength was impacted. There's all sorts of different things, right? So when we're looking at kids, like the lens at which we're looking at like one isolated behavior or one isolated function, often it's not isolated, right? There's so many other carryover of like, well, this impacts this, which impacts this, which impacts this. So it's kind of interesting sometimes too to get parents in the clinic and be talking through things, and we can kind of help connect the dots of like, yeah, picky eating and trouble with toileting and difficulty tolerating sounds can all be tied to like a similar type of dysfunction. So that's kind of cool too, just to see like that click with parents of this is all related. It's not just all challenging because of different purposes or reasons.
Yeah, that makes me think of the benefit of coming to you pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
What would you guys say about that? I mean, because if there is a dysfunction, the ways it manifests will continue to branch out and grow. And so sometimes, you don't really catch on to the fact that we might need OT or identify a dysfunction younger. That's fine. But other times we can ignore cues when kids are younger and postpone getting to you. And then it seems to me, the more we postpone, the harder it is to undo. But how would you guys respond to that?
I would agree. I think there's kind of a window where sometimes it can be hard for kids to tolerate therapy, like just that window of like we're learning to be very independent. We're like wanting to be very independent, and structured activities can be hard, but we're still in that, like, we need a lot of assistance. So in those instances, I think like a lot of our intervention then is more like parent education driven, like here's what we can be doing at home versus addressing those things maybe right there in the session. We still try to do that, but it just looks a little different. But yeah, I would agree with that. Like the earlier we can start to address these things, the better, so that our brain's not getting in these ruts of how it's processing it. I mean, Elise, you use this analogy, like our brain is kind of like all these little dirt roads, right? So the more we drive down a dirt road, the farther and farther that rut is going to get. And it's going to be harder for us to go down that same dirt road and take a different path because we're so deep in the mud, right? Every time that pathway fires, we're deepening that connection. So to try to rewire the brain or try to find another connection is going to be harder the longer we wait to do so. Yeah, but also with that being said, like it's never too late, right? There's always something that we can address and something we can do. So there's not a window of like, well, if we don't get to this by 10 years old, like that's just how it's going to be. It's just more of those like critical development windows where if we can catch it before we're in those ruts, it's going to be the easiest for us to try to address those concerns.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that too about like the age limit and stuff. I've been seeing a lot more parents lately of kids that I work with. You know, and just looking at the, you know, sometimes it's maybe a trauma that, you know, they've gone through with their child. You know, some of these parents have really done a lot of hard things with their kids. Sometimes it's maybe their sensory preferences are completely opposite of their child's sensory preferences. And if we can kind of bring some light to that, like, hey, you know what? There isn't like an ideal sensory preference. We aren't trying to change everybody from avoiders into seekers. Like our world would be a total chaotic mess if we were all sensory seekers. So, you know, but just helping parents kind of see like that their preferences do impact kind of their child's development too. But then also, yeah, just helping them even with their own regulation. So that's been kind of interesting just because, yeah, it's really a lifelong process. So it's helpful sometimes for families to understand where they all are on that, you know, in that wheelhouse. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just even the importance of co-regulation, right? Like we can't co-regulate if we're not regulated. So teaching parents, like, here's how you need to help yourself before you try to put the oxygen mask on your child. You know, it's the same as the airplane spiel. Like you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. I just had that conversation with a parent this morning too, of like, we can't regulate a child when we're dysregulated. That's not to say it's impossible, but we're, you know, ramping each other up as we're trying to calm down. So finding those ways to help yourself first is always key.
I have a question for Corey.
Okay.
So you've been a pediatrician for 16 years. I would love to hear your thoughts on the biggest changes you've seen in kids from when you know, just in general, like, because I get this question a lot, like, you know, how has your practice changed? How has your, just what you're seeing in kids, how has that changed in 16 years?
So there's a bias to my lens because when I came, I started, you know, I got a whole bunch of new babies. And so now those babies are 16, right? The majority, I mean, not that I didn't see any teenagers when I first got here, but like I've really kind of been growing up in my practice with the kids that are growing up. And so there are things that are just, you see more because you're seeing more teenagers. But I am pretty shocked at the amount of how pervasive anxiety is, how much it impacts kids at all ages. And this is social dysregulation a term. Socially, the way kids are dysregulated when in the early childhood is shocking to me too. I spend a lot of time talking about sleep. I spend a lot of time talking about screens, and I spend a lot of time talking about sugar. So, I mean, and you guys do help. You help with diet and with sleep and with, I don't know how much you talk about screens with your families, but I mean, the
Often.
research on the amount of screen time and how it affects behavior is very clear, but the guidelines are not. So I think people have a sense that it's not good for their kids, but transitioning that into like organizing your life differently so that kids are not exposed to screens when they're little is not happening as much as it needs to. And that definitely affects development.
One thing I think is interesting with screens too is like how much kids are using screens at school. I think that's like a common misconception, or maybe parents aren't aware. Like those very vague screen line guidelines, they're probably getting a lot of that time when they're at school even, and it doesn't really matter what that screen time is. Like it doesn't matter that it's learning time. Like screen time is screen time, and yes, there's better quality screen time and like more passive like input screen time, but it's still screen time. So that's something I feel like we have talked about a lot with parents in the last year or maybe 2 years since we go to some schools. And so we've been able to just see like what that looks like at school a little bit differently too, because I think parents see like, oh, they should get 30 minutes of screen time a day or an hour of screen time, and don't realize that like they've already gotten that by the time they come home, right? So what can we do instead? It's just hard. Yeah, it's a hard conversation to have when it is, like you said, the structure of their life that maybe has to change to be able to implement those changes.
Well, and it's a lot harder, right? Like I'm guessing, Corey, when your, kids were little, at least for me, when we would go to a restaurant, I had a whole entire backpack that was a loaded, arsenal of activities to be able to sit there and, because we didn't have smartphones and didn't have an iPad, and so they played with Matchbox cars and dry erase books, and that was
the access was different.
Yeah, and so that was just how it was. Whereas now it's a whole lot easier to walk into a restaurant with just your phone and just hand it over, and so yeah, it's kind of like eating, right? It takes a lot more work and effort and thought to eat healthy compared to eating unhealthy. And so, yeah. I've been alarmed lately when I ask kids, like, what do you like to do when when you're not at school? What do you like to do at home? And either their inability to answer that question, like they aren't sure, or the fact that most of the activities that they like to do are related to watching YouTube or being on their, a tablet or a phone or, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then the parents are, like, and I always assume, I'm like, well, what if your mom or dad didn't let you do that all day? Then what would you like to do? So, like, let's go a little further here. But yeah, it's their favorite thing. So it's hard to take it away, but important.
And monkey see, monkey do too, right? Like we, as adults, are more and more on screens. So it's hard to have a different expectation for your child than what you might be modeling. So just even being aware of that is hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, one of our other questions, and we get this question often as well, but what does an evaluation for OT actually consist of, and what is the process of getting started with OT? I can speak to like the getting started part. As far as seeing a kiddo for OT, typically we will get referrals from physicians like Corey. Sometimes we'll get parents that have maybe heard of the service, or, my friend comes here and we're having similar concerns, or, just word of mouth. The process of getting started looks a little bit different just depending on insurance. So if you have like Medicaid, Medicare, some sort of like government-based insurance, we do need a referral from the physician, but beyond that, the process is the same for everybody. So there's some paperwork that we have parents, or if the child is old enough to help with that, sometimes those adolescents or adult patients will complete the paperwork as well, looking at like medical history. We have parents fill out a sensory profile, so helping to identify those child's sensory preferences. We also have parents complete a reflex checklist. So this is essentially just a checklist that's got a whole bunch of different skills listed on it. And they just check like, yes, this is challenging for them, or yes, we have concerns about X, Y, or Z. After we get that paperwork and we get the evaluation set up, the eval process sometimes can depend on what those concerns look like. So typically we'll start with, like I mentioned earlier, those little activities that are like helping see how our brain and body are working together. So we look at balance, we look at coordination, we look at primitive reflexes quite a bit. So we kind of talked about those a little bit. It's more of that foundational level of our pyramid. And a lot of our evaluation is talking with parents and with the kids, if appropriate, about what life looks like outside of the four walls of our clinic, to see like what are the things that are really challenging for us, what do we want to see improve, and then also like what types of things are we doing really well, right? How can we build off of the strengths that we already have to help maybe support those areas that are challenging for us? Elise, do you have anything to add to eval stuff?
No, I think
like-
you covered it. Sometimes there'll be things that we identify in the eval and then decide, okay, well, we'll look further into this next
Right.
time. Some of those
Mhm.
things take a little bit longer, like the visual perception piece, if we need to do that. So yeah, but try
Yeah.
and be as thorough and yeah, looking at the whole picture as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that process is ongoing, right? We never get a whole picture of a kiddo, or an adult for that matter, in that first appointment, right? Our evaluation is ongoing. As we progress through therapy too, we might notice things that we didn't notice on day one, or things might change. So we're always kind of evaluating to see where we're at and where we're headed.
How often do you recommend someone that you're working with see a physical therapist or a vision therapist or a speech therapist, or do you cross refer that way?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it
Definitely.
depends. Like I feel like sometimes it comes in waves where we'll get a lot of kids for, I don't know, toe walking, or we'll get a lot of kids that struggle with communication, and frustration tolerance is hard, but they have a hard time communicating. So I would say pretty often. And
I've gotten a
sometimes,
few referrals lately from speech therapists, and the main
yeah,
concern is speech. And I was like, okay, but you're at speech therapy. But I think the speech therapists are starting to realize, that there could be, again, something
yeah,
farther
more
down the chain. So wanting us to look at reflexes, or,
Yeah.
even oral motor
Mhm.
sensory issues. Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, you're good. Yeah, I think sometimes it depends too. Like if we have a kiddo that we're seeing that we're like, I wonder if PT would be helpful for them. We have physical therapists that work at our offices, so we can like, hey, Kylie, can you pop in and look at, like, here's what I'm noticing. Is there anything you think might help? So a lot of times if we have people accessible that we can like collaborate even within session, we'll try to do that. It's I mean, we often refer out to, we don't have speech therapy in our offices, so we have to refer out for that. Same with play therapy or vision therapy. But sometimes it's just knowing like which families have the bandwidth for that too. Like what's our primary focus right now? And if emotional regulation or attention is our focus, but vision is also really hard, there are certain families that have the capacity to be able to do both at the same time, or that can handle like more appointments in a week. And there's others that are already, stretched to be able to make it to OT. So sometimes it's a matter of like prioritizing how can we address what we can right now. And then as we progress in those more foundational skills, then like when our plan of care is up, we'll refer on to X, Y, or Z. So just depends. Let's see. There was a question too about like, what should I tell my kids to expect when coming to OT? So Elise, maybe you can share that.
Sure. I think it depends on like the age of the child, first of all, but a lot of times I'll have parents just make sure that they know that it's going to be a fun appointment that we're going to do, and no offense, Corey, but a lot of times they want to know that they're not going to get shots or, it's like, oh.
I always tell them it's not me that gives the shots.
That's true.
That's what I tell them.
It's true. And really, I've even had sometimes where it's an issue with the child not wanting to address maybe the regulation issues first, like the emotional regulation. So it's kind of nice because we do go through a lot of that coordination and body work first, or alongside of that. And so I'll give them a little glimpse of maybe what we do a lot of fun activities and we do obstacle courses and, those types of things, so that they know like, okay, we're gonna, do some fun things. We play, games and that type of thing. And I think, like Rachel said too, trying to explain like, okay, we want to just check the connection between your body and your brain, but that the primary thing is that we're going to have a good time. So if a child needs to have fun, if they don't have fun, then they're not motivated. And if they're not motivated, it's just like an adult, right? We need motivation. And so we need to make sure that they're enjoying it. So
that's the feedback I get from my patients, which makes it so easy to make referrals. Everyone says, oh, they love going to OT.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, we often, at least in Ames, we often hear like, we're going to the game doctor today, or we're going to the play doctor. Like it is a lot of just like baseline helping them regulate in those moments of play and fun interactions. And then like, how do we carry that over into life? But, Corey, maybe this would be a good question for you to kind of jump in on too. The question is, what overlap do you see between OT and like talk therapy or play therapy? I know our answer to that, but if you have a kiddo or a family who's kind of contemplating like both of those things, more like talk therapy versus OT, like how do you distinguish the two, or when would you say like, okay, yes, OT versus yes, talk therapy?
Boy, I wish I had a better formula in my head when I decide to do which. I often recommend them both and acknowledge that they'll probably do them serially, like not both at the same time. I feel like more and more, you guys talked about age a little bit, and I'm rethinking. I think sometimes my older kids, they start with talk therapy. My younger ones, I almost always have start with occupational therapy. I'm thinking maybe I should rethink that a little bit, but so age is part of it, and what I think they could tolerate as far as talk. But how I think about it is back to your pyramid a little bit. I think one is kind of top down, one is bottom up, and I think you have to think about both.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have parents ask, oh, so now that we're here, should we quit going to counseling? No,
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 right.
don't, I never tell parents to quit anything that they're doing if they're, able to do both. Because like you said, we're going bottom up, they're coming top down. And so the two together can be just a really awesome combination. Especially if we're able to kind of work together and have communication with each other and, know kind of what approach they're taking too. So, yeah.
And the reality is in our area anyway, talk therapy, that might be a 7-month wait. So,
Right. Yeah,
and
that's true.
And often it is, I think maybe some people are more familiar with it or think that's what they need is the talk therapy. So I think people are pleasantly surprised when we say, yeah, go ahead and get on your list for talk therapy. I think that will be great when it comes. But we can really make some good progress before that, starting with some occupational therapy.
Yeah.
We have a group in town that does psychoeducational evaluations. So that's like the formal testing for anxiety and for ADHD and learning disorders. More recently, their reports will recommend occupational therapy too, even before talk.
Okay.
So that's helpful.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot recently.
Have you seen that more?
Yeah, and I think, what's kind of nice about that too is like nobody likes to talk about the things that are really challenging for them all the time. And sometimes when kids are in, 3 or 4 therapies at a time, like that feels like their life is just talking about and thinking about the things that are really hard. So sometimes just even taking a step back and when we're working on things in OT, like, yes, there is talking involved in that. And sometimes we do talk about things that are challenging or frustrating or whatever it might be, but that's not our primary focus of just like talking about it the whole time. Like we're trying to build in those same skills, but in the context of like functional activities or play. So back to Elise's point about it needs to be fun. It doesn't feel like the same type of work that talk therapy might feel like. So we have a lot of kids that have a history of trauma or really struggle with more of those traditionally like talk therapy skills like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, whatever it might be. But when we're coming at it from a different context or a different perspective, sometimes kids can be more receptive even within talk therapy because like they're doing something else that feels a little bit more fun and then they can understand why both are beneficial. So it can be a nice complement too of just like if we're working on more of the body regulation stuff, sometimes we'll see that they can tolerate talk therapy or play therapy better because they're more regulated at baseline to be able to talk about those things that are really challenging. It's just, like you said, complementary, but different at the same time. One of the last questions that we had on our little list here was how long is a typical plan of care? How long do you see kids? That is a loaded question. It really depends. It depends so much on like why we're seeing the kiddo, what types of things we're addressing, how many things we're attempting to address. So sometimes if it's something like they struggle with fine motor skills, being able to write or cut or get themselves dressed, those motor skills typically don't take as long for us to address compared to more higher level at the top of those pyramid type skills like emotional regulation, impulse control, social skills, because there's just more area to cover, right? So when we're starting at that baseline, if we're addressing skills that are at the top of that pyramid, it's going to take us longer to climb that ladder than, okay, we're functionally doing great with attention and focus. We're just a little clumsy, right? That's a little easier for us to address in a short window of time. So it depends. And sometimes we'll see kids for a period of time and we'll address a certain set of goals. And then we'll discharge, things are going well, and then life changes, right? They hit a growth spurt or a new period of life, right? We saw them when they were 6 and now they're 10. and the social dynamics are different, and school's a lot harder. So sometimes we'll see, like, we're seeing them for multiple plans of care, but the goals are very different within those different plans of care. Sometimes it's even continuous, like we just are working on things for a while because we're starting from ground zero versus starting from higher up on that pyramid. Well, let's maybe open it up. I don't know if either of our participants here have any questions that they would like answered specifically, but if you guys do, you can put them in the Q&A or unmute, and we'd be happy to answer those too. If not, Elise, were there any other questions you could think of, or Corey?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. This was fun.
Yeah, very fun. Only thing more fun is if we had been in a coffee shop.
I know. Agreed.
Sometime. Yeah, thank you so much too, Corey, for joining us.
Yes,
and
we
yeah,
appreciate
it's good
it.
to see you again. And
Yeah,
thank you to those participants who joined in. So
Yes.
great. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Yes, thank you guys. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.